Hi, this video is about EURORACK kick drums and different solutions for that. Featured in this video are the Soundforce SLD, Malstrom MANDRAKE, WMD Crater, Erica's Pico Drums, and then there's a few techniques for creating your own kick drums with filters like Ripples, Soundforce µVCF 6, using a Cosmotronic Delta V for envelopes. When it comes to kick drums, there's a lot of options to choose from in the EURORACK world. But one route you can take is just going full-on rompler, and by that I mean using a sample-based module where you cannot exchange the samples. The Soundforce SLD is such a module, though I have to say that you can load several firmwares on it. This module is as easy as you can get it. You just send in a trigger, you connect the kick drum output to your mixer, and you're done. Now, if you want to be able to tweak a few things, you might be better off choosing a sampler like the Pico Drums. You can go for a very big sampler as well, but I find these, well, they're small and you can upload your own sounds to it. I have one with drum samples exclusively, and the other one has, well, some radio broadcasts that I, well, uploaded to the module, and that's always a lot of fun. As you can see, you can tweak a few parameters. You can tweak the pitch, which also changes the speed of the sample. You can change the decay, or release, I should say. And you can also tweak the levels a little bit. You can even control one of these three parameters with CV. Just don't expect that it tracks volt per octave accurately. It does not at all. But you can change the speed and the pitch of the samples. For this technique, I will be using ripples as a sound source. So this one, and the left side of Delta V is an envelope generator. To create a sound coming from a filter, you need to turn up the resonance until it starts self-oscillating. This gives us a really, really pure sine wave. You pitch it down. We're not making tom-toms, we're making kick drums. And then I'm sending the envelope output of Delta V into the frequency modulation input of the filter. Delta V is just creating an envelope that's being triggered by some kind of pattern. This one is coming from Zularic repetitor. You can adjust the sound of this type of kick drum by playing around with the envelope settings. Usually I keep it at an exponential curve. If you have the option between exponential, logarithmic or linear curves, it's the exponential that yields the best results for this. Well, at least in my experience. The attack should be 0 and the decay should be, well, rather short. And you can adjust the effect by adjusting the amount of frequency modulation. Now, as you can hear and see, there's no spaces in between the kick drums. The filter really keeps on oscillating. To fix this, we need to send our sound through a VCA, but Ripples has a built-in VCA. that you can send a separate envelope to, or any other modulator. I just connected it to the gain input. So this is the right part of delta V. I know I said I wouldn't be using that, but I'm a bit confused apparently. So the left side is doing the pitch sweep, which is very fast, and then the right side envelope, which is getting triggered by the same trigger. There's a switch on delta V that's linking the two sides. So the envelope that I was using for the volume was a little bit slower. It had a longer decay. And this is just to ensure that some of the fundamental, the lowest notes of the kick drum are getting through. Now I stopped using the right side of delta V and I just melted the envelope that I'm sending to the frequency modulation, and I'm sending that to well, the CV input for the VCA as well. So if you're in a pinch and you don't have two envelope generators at your disposal, you can hear that, well, when you adjust the settings to taste, that you can just as well create a nice kick drum sound, even with just a filter and one envelope. Well, I'm saying just a filter, but it's a filter with a built-in PCA. If you don't have a spare VCA, you can turn down the pitch very low, which, well, it will still take up some energy, well, a lot of energy, but it might be not audible anymore. So what I'm doing right now is trying out a different feedback paths. Sometimes that's a nice way to change up the clean sine wave to something with a little bit more grit or dirt. On Ripples, there's several filter outputs, so you can just try out which one works better for you. So to get this to work, I rerouted the envelope for our pitch to the regular frequency input on Ripples, which is a kind of volt-per-octave input, but it doesn't track really well. And this frees up the FM input with the attenuverter, so I can adjust the feedback with that knob. And you can clearly hear that there's some more, yeah, it's more of a metallic sound. But again, this is just using one envelope generator and, well, a filter with a built-in VCA. And you can, well, you can start doing different feedback things as well when you send the audio back into the input. So here I once again am using the right side of delta V as a separate envelope generator for the VCA of the filter to be able to adjust the decays of the pitch and the volume envelopes separately. Of course, this gives far superior control over how our kick drum sounds, but as I demonstrated, it's not absolutely necessary to have a separate envelope generator for that. Now let's move over to another filter here. I will be using the µVCF 6 by Soundforce. What I'm going to do now is just, well, I'm just going to assume that you don't have any envelope generators at your disposal, at least for the first part of this technique. I will be just using the filter as a sound source again. I'll turn it up into self-oscillation to get a tone. But what I then will do is turn down the resonance until it just stops self-oscillating. And this can be then well, triggered. This is what they call pinging a filter. At the moment I'm sending in gates coming from EURORACK repetitor, but I'm getting double triggers. Sometimes this happens that you get a filter ping when the gate goes up and another one when the gate goes down. So I will be switching out to a trigger pattern coming straight from Pamela's new workout. So again, I just turn up the resonance completely until the filter starts oscillating. And then I turn it down again. And then when you activate or agitate it with a trigger signal going into the audio input, by the way, you get these filter pings that have a clear decay, even though we're not using any kind of envelopes at this moment. So now I will be using a muted trigger to trigger an envelope. Again, I'm using one side of delta V, and I will be using the output of this envelope generator to control the frequency of the filter. And this can give us a bit more control over the attack sound of the kick drum. And I will be just playing around with different settings. I will be adjusting the amount of frequency modulation that's happening on the filter. I will also be adjusting the decay times of the envelope. And again, to make things clear, I'm not using a VCA to close the sound. This is just a natural occurrence when you are sending triggers into the audio input of a filter that's on the edge of self-oscillation. So what I'm doing right now is well, the same thing as before, but now I'm sending a volt per octave sequence coming from step 8, so it's not a quantized sequence. And the sequence is 7 steps long. I'm sending this pitch sequence into the volt per octave input of the filter. And as you can hear, this gives us, well, it's almost a bass line, but if you tune up the filter, this can be percussive. Maybe those are ideal bongos. So yeah. There's a lot that you can do to create some kind of a kick drum sound. Now maybe you don't need that level of tweakability, but you still want a versatile kick drum that you can use in different situations. Then perhaps a hybrid solution like the WMD Crater is right for you. I'm saying it's a hybrid solution because there's an analog core which is very similar to what we did a few minutes ago. It has the fundamental, and you can tweak the pitch sweep. So that's the analog part, but Crater also has a sample-based digital part, which gives us the initial hit or click, as it's called on the module, of our drum. And this, well, gives the impression of different kind of drum heads. You can control the decay of this sample. If you turn it completely to the right, you get a very sloppy attack phase. So there's, I don't know how many, I think at least 8 sounds to choose from, and they go from lower pitched to higher pitched. Like I said, you can control the decay. You can also control the level of this initial click or hit. And by combining these two features, you get a kick drum that can give you a wide variety of tones. And as you can see, the decay goes up very high. And there's a few parameters that you can control with CV. There's also an accent input that you can use to, well, yeah, create accents for certain hits. And there's a 1 volt proactive pitch input as well, which tracks rather nicely. As I'll try to demonstrate here. There's 3 settings for, well, the sound timbre. There's no clipping, which is, I think, just using a sine wave as a fundamental. And then there's 2 more clipping or drive settings, and they shape the fundamental to be, well, it starts to sound more like a triangle and then even a somewhat distorted triangle. Let me just play around with the features of Crater a little bit, so you can get an idea of, well, the wide tonal variation that you can get from this module. So this is the first clipping stage, or yeah, there's just the middle setting, and this is the most clipped setting. now let's have a look at what is my favorite solution in EURORACK, the Malstrom MANDRAKE, which is, well, somewhat reminiscent of what Crater is doing, but this is fully analog. There's no samples inside this module. And, well, there's just more features to tweak. We have the usual suspects like decay, decay for the sound, the VCA, and then there's the decay for the pitch sweep and also the amount of pitch sweep, which is called P mod here. With Mandrake we can change the bass shape. I think this switches between sine and triangle. You can control the damping, which to me sounds a bit like it's adding a little bit of saturation. And openness to the sound. As you can hear, well, I guess damping is, well, the right word for this. There's also a volume control for the output. Of course, there's a general pitch control, and then there's these buttons to the left here. These white ones control our hit, and this is similar to the click on Crater, but this one is just analog. I'm not sure what it is exactly, but it's just a short, pulse of noise, I think. And you can control the timbre, which is the pitch really, and the volume. And you can control all of these things with CV as well, which is great. And I will show you in a minute how wild Mandrake can sound. There's a few CV inputs that give you attenuverters. There's also a clean setting and a, well, somewhat distorted setting. Well, it's not completely distorted, but it has some hair. Then to the top left of the module, you can see that there's a saturation control and a resonance control. The resonance again makes the sound fuller. It's a little bit in tandem with the damping, I think. And the saturation knob, of course, increases the saturation. There's a shape switch for the decay as well. I think this switches between an exponential curve and a linear or maybe even logarithmic curve. But the mileage on this one is just great. And I prefer this kick drum module over WMD Crater because the fundamental is much clearer on this one. I should explain what I mean. When I record drums with Crater, either I have to tune up the pitch to be able to hear some boom, but then it's really too high, or when I tune it down to, well, usual frequency of a kick drum, which is anything below 100 Hertz, I think. With Crater, if you tune it down that much, it seems just to be gone. It's not there. Even with long decay settings, well, at some point the decay is just too long. It's just not my favorite kick drum, especially not to, well, mix. And I really prefer Mandrake because, well, that fundamental boom is right where I want it to be, and there's still some definition to it. And I'm not sure what's actually happening inside Crater that makes me not like it as much. But luckily there's a huge amount of modules to choose from, so I'm sure if you look around a bit, you'll find a kick drum that just suits your needs. This video is not sponsored, by the way. No one asked me to make a video about these modules. And actually I got Mandrake as payment for making the video about Archon, which is a variable curve 4-quadrant multiplier. Well, that's a mouthful. So I asked for something, and we agreed on Mandrake. I was really excited to try it out because, well, I had these issues with Crater, which seems to be the best kick drum module out there, but I don't think it is. So I was very excited and curious to try Mandrake out. And well, my intuition was right. It's just a killer of a module. I really love it very much. So with that being said, I think I will end the video here. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you learned something. See you next time. Bye.